4 goals, 2 knockout games, 5 days. Let that land for a second. Victor Gyökeres just carried Sweden to the World Cup almost entirely on his own. Hat-trick against Ukraine, winning goal against Poland, 88th minute on home soil. And look, the natural reaction is to celebrate that, enjoy it, appreciate what we just witnessed. But I want to ask something that I think is genuinely worth sitting with before the highlights finish playing. Is this the best possible thing that could have happened to Arsenal's run-in? Or does it quietly introduce the one risk that Mikel Arteta simply cannot control? Stay with me on this, because this story has a lot more going on beneath the surface than people are giving it credit for. Welcome back, I'm Amelia. This is Amelia Arsenal Update. If you are new here, this channel goes deeper than the headline, not just what happened, but what it means, what it changes, and what most people haven't noticed yet. Today, Victor Gyökeres, Alexander Isak, Sweden's World Cup qualification, and what all of it actually tells us about Arsenal from this point forward. A lot to get through. Let's go. Right. Before we get into the analysis, I want to make sure we are all working from the same picture here, because context matters. And I think some of it has been slightly lost this week in the noise of the celebration. Victor Gyökeres arrived at Arsenal in July 2025. He came from Sporting CP, where, let's be honest, he had been one of the most dominant strikers in European football over the previous 2 seasons. Back-to-back Portuguese league titles, top scorer both times, Gerd Müller trophy winner. The man was in the form of his life before he even kicked a ball in the Premier League. But that is exactly what made the early part of his Arsenal career so interesting to analyse, because the question was never really about talent, it was about adaptation. Can he do it in the Premier League? Can he do it in the Champions League? Can he handle the physicality, the pace, the intensity of English football week in, week out? And what we have seen since August is a player steadily, quietly answering those questions 1 game at a time. 11 Premier League goals, more than any other player in 2026. 2 against Tottenham in a performance that pretty much every respected analyst in the game called his best for the club. That is the baseline we were working from heading into this international break. And then Sweden happened. Now here is what I actually want to explore today. And I want to be precise about this, because I think how you frame a question determines how useful the answer is. This is not simply a story about 4 goals and a World Cup celebration. The deeper question, the one I think is genuinely worth your time, is this: what do these performances actually confirm? Because there is a very meaningful difference between scoring 4 goals in 2 friendly matches and scoring 4 goals in 2 World Cup elimination games where one bad night sends your nation home. Different pressure, different psychological weight, different test entirely. And when you place these international performances alongside what Gyökeres has been producing at club level all season, something starts to crystallise. But here is the thing. And I mentioned this at the top, and I want to come back to it properly. Embedded inside this very positive story is a risk that nobody seems to want to talk about right now. We will get there, I promise. But let me first break down why these playoff performances carry real analytical weight. Ukraine set up defensively, Poland set up defensively. Both teams came to stay compact, to frustrate, to make Sweden do all the work. Now, does that sound familiar? Because that is exactly what Premier League defences are doing to Gyökeres every single week at club level. And I am not just saying that as an observation. Tracking data from this season confirms it. He receives less space when available to receive the ball than any other striker in the Premier League. 2 defenders on him constantly from the first minute. Every team has a plan for Gyökeres, and yet he keeps finding solutions. Against Ukraine, it was 3 goals. His movement in behind, his timing, his strength to hold the ball and bring others into the game. What those playoff games tell us, and this is important, is that Gyokeres does not exclusively depend on Arsenal's system to function. Strip away Arteta's structure, strip away the tactical familiarity of his club teammates, put him in a different environment under elimination pressure, he still performs, and that distinction matters a great deal more than people are acknowledging. So here is a question I want you to hold in your mind as we go deeper. What does it actually tell you about a player when they perform under pressure across completely different environments, club, international, knockout football, all in the same season? Because I think the answer to that question is more significant than any individual statistic. Keep that thought, we will come back to it. Now let me talk about something specific that I think got lost in the highlight coverage. The Poland winner came in the 88th minute. Think about what that moment actually represents physically. Gyökeres had played the full 90 against Ukraine 5 days earlier. He had travelled, recovered, prepared again, gone through everything. A major knockout game demands mentally and physically. And in the 88th minute, when most players are running on whatever reserves they have left, he produced the most important moment of Sweden's entire qualification campaign. Now I want to be careful here. As a journalist, I try not to overinterpret individual moments. Late goals are not always proof of superior physical conditioning. Sometimes it is just circumstance. But place this next to his second half goals against Tottenham, his impact in big Champions League moments, his consistency deep into matches all season, and the pattern that forms is not coincidental. This is a player whose output, physically and mentally, holds up in the moments that matter most. For a team that has historically found it difficult to close games in the final stages, that is not a minor detail about their striker. That could be a defining detail. Right, this is where things change, because I have been talking about Gyökeres and I want to keep talking about him, but I cannot tell this story properly without bringing in a second character, and that character is Alexander Isak. Now, I want to be upfront about something here because I think intellectual honesty matters in these conversations. I am not going to frame this as a rivalry for the sake of engagement. That would be lazy analysis, and I think you deserve better than that. But the facts of this situation are genuinely significant, and ignoring them would be dishonest. So let me lay it out clearly. Alexander Isak joined Liverpool in September 2025 for £125 million. A British transfer record, still is one of the most naturally gifted strikers in world football when fit and in form. Nobody serious argues with that. But here is the reality of his season so far. Broken fibula in December. But I'll be honest with you, I read that post and I thought about it for a while because Isak is an intelligent footballer. He knows exactly what Gyökeres just did. He knows what it looked like to the outside world, and he knows the clock is running on his opportunity to write his own version of this story before the season ends. That is not a criticism of Isak at all. It is just the reality of the situation both players are now in. So here is the question that naturally follows. Can Isak return from that broken fibula with limited match sharpness and produce the kind of performances Liverpool need from him before this season is decided? That answer matters not just for Liverpool, it matters directly for Arsenal, and we will explore why in just a moment. Let me be clear about something before I go further. This is not a story about one player being better than the other. That framing is too simple and, frankly, not very useful analytically. What this actually is a story about divergence. Two Swedish strikers, same generation, same international team, both in the Premier League, both at clubs in contention. One season defined by injury and disruption, one season defined by goals, momentum and international recognition. And the divergence between those two trajectories tells us something very specific about where both Arsenal and Liverpool stand right now. For Arsenal, the Gyökeres situation is, and I am going to say this plainly, about as good as it could realistically be at this stage of the season, available in form, confident, just experienced the kind of high-pressure success that reinforces belief at the deepest level. For Liverpool, the situation is genuinely more uncertain. Arne Slot has a real squad management problem on his hands. How do you reintegrate a £125 million striker who has not played since December into a Champions League and FA Cup run-in? How quickly can someone reach the performance level required after that length of time out? These are not rhetorical questions. They are legitimate coaching problems without clean answers. And they matter for Arsenal because Liverpool remain a genuine title rival, and the fitness and form of their striker is a direct variable in how that race plays out over the next 6 weeks. Right, here is my professional assessment. No hedging, just what I actually think based on everything I have looked at. Viktor Gyökeres is no longer in the category of players whose quality needs to be debated. That debate is finished. You do not score 4 goals in 2 World Cup elimination games, lead the Premier League scoring chart in 2026, produce consistent Champions League performances, and still have your level seriously questioned. The evidence is no longer accumulating. It has arrived. And the Sporting to Arsenal transfer, when you assess it purely on football value at this point in the season, is performing above expectation on every measurable dimension: goals, influence, availability, mentality, big game temperament. Now, and this matters because good analysis remembers the full picture, his first 10 Arsenal games produced just 3 goals. There was an adjustment period, a genuine one. I think it would be dishonest to pretend that did not happen. But what is clear now is that the adjustment is complete. And what is emerging on the other side of it is a striker operating very close to his ceiling. The question has shifted. It is no longer whether Gyökeres is good enough. The question now is what happens when a striker operating at this level has the full support of everything Arsenal can offer him across the final stretch of the season? And that brings me to the bigger picture question, which I think is actually the most important question in this entire conversation. What does this season look like if Arsenal go all the way? Let me zoom out for a moment, because I think the scale of what is potentially happening here deserves proper framing. If Arsenal win the Premier League title this season and Gyökeres finishes as the top scorer, you're now looking at one of the most impactful debut seasons by an attacking signing in Premier League history. I'm not saying that to generate excitement. I'm saying it because the numbers and the context both support it. Arsenal spent years searching for a genuine elite number 9, a striker who could carry them through the big moments, perform in Europe, in derbies, in a title race and on an international stage, all within the same campaign. And right now, in April 2026, Gyökeres is doing exactly that. If this ends the way it currently looks like it might end with a league title, a top scorer award and a World Cup on the horizon, then the conversation around this signing will shift completely from smart transfer to transformational transfer, the kind that changes the identity of a club. That is a significant thing to say, but I think it is accurate. Now, I need to come back to the question I opened with because I think it would be irresponsible not to. Gyokeres played 2 full international playoff matches in 5 days. He now has 4 days before Arsenal's next fixture. And in all of the celebration, which is deserved, genuinely, nobody is really sitting with the fatigue question. I understand why. It feels awkward to raise it when someone has just done something extraordinary, but it is the professional responsibility to ask it. Elite athletes carry compressed schedules. Gyökeres has shown all season that his physical resilience is exceptional. We have established that. But there is a meaningful difference between standard international duty and 2 high-stakes elimination games in 5 days followed immediately by a title race run-in. Mikel Arteta will have a decision to make on April 4th against Southampton in the FA Cup. Does he start Gyökeres? Does he protect him? Does he trust the player to manage his own body? Watch that decision, not just for what it means for the Southampton game, but for what it tells you about how Arsenal are reading this situation at the highest level of their planning. That decision is a signal. So what are we watching for from here? A few specific things. First, April 4th, as I said, Gyökeres' involvement, watch Arteta's call. Second, around April 19th, Isak's projected return to match fitness. Does he have enough runway left this season to change the Liverpool narrative? And if he comes back and immediately performs, does that reopen a conversation that currently feels quite settled? Third, the Champions League trajectory for both clubs. If Arsenal and Liverpool both go deep into Europe, Gyökeres and Isak will miss the Sweden versus Norway friendly in June. Minor detail in isolation, but the bigger implication is what arrives after that. Both players will reach the 2026 World Cup in North America, having just completed one of the most demanding European domestic seasons in recent memory. Load management becomes a conversation that involves club managers, national team coaches, and the players themselves simultaneously. That is a genuinely complex situation for everyone involved. And if Arsenal win the title and Gyökeres leads the line at the World Cup this summer, that is the moment where Swedish football and Arsenal football meet at the highest possible level at the same time. That is not a small thing historically for either institution. Look, I will be honest with you. When I started looking at this story this week, I expected to analyse it quickly and move on. A positive international break. Gyökeres scored some goals, Sweden qualified, good news, done. But the more I examined it, the timing, the physical demands, the parallel Isak situations, the Arsenal running context, the broader season implications, the more I realised there was something genuinely substantial here, something that deserved proper examination, not just a quick reaction. And I think the most considered thing I can say to close this video is something I mean as an analyst. The only question left worth asking about Viktor Gyökeres is not whether he belongs at this level. That has been answered. The question now is whether Arsenal can protect him well enough, manage him carefully enough, and build the right environment around him in these final 6 weeks to find out just how good he is truly capable of being. Because I do not think we are at the ceiling yet, and that, honestly, is both the most exciting part of this story and the most important thing to hold on to as this season reaches its conclusion. If this gave you something to think about, drop a comment below. I genuinely read everyone, and they shape what we cover next. If you are not subscribed yet, now is a good time. There is a lot still to analyse between now and the end of this season. I'm Amila. This is Amila Arsenal Update. See you in the next one.